Morning, Tolly, and it's great to be here. I think the figures that we're going to see tomorrow is going to show a little bit of a dire state in terms of the unemployment figures. The civil unrest experienced in July has had a negative impact not only on the economy but on the jobs. I personally live in the KZN area and I've experienced it firsthand in terms of what the social unrest has done to the local communities, to the businesses here. And I do suspect that we're going to see those figures look worse than they did in the second quarter.
How decimated was the small business sector by that unrest? And in fact, might I venture in this question and ask, is it possible, based on what you have gathered so far, is it possible that, in fact, they may have been the main target?
I definitely think it is possible that businesses, whether small or large, have been the main target. It is, however, very saddening to see that these businesses that are trying to make an impact, trying to create jobs, trying to help the growth and recovery of the economy were negatively impacted. It was already tough to be an entrepreneur pre-COVID. COVID made it much more difficult to run businesses. And I think the civil unrest was just another area of complexity that these businesses had to face. And I know of some businesses that either had to close doors or new businesses that were scheduled to open that didn't open. So it really is going to have a negative and a lasting impact. And it's going to take a while to recover from the social unrest.
Yeah, let's talk now then about the potential that these small businesses, or as you might want to call it, the potential of venture capital to stimulate job creation and the recovery that our economy right now so desperately needs.
So venture capital invests in early stage businesses and mainly businesses that have the opportunity to scale. And because the venture capital industry do their due diligence, they identify businesses that have the opportunity to not only scale locally but internationally. And when a venture capital fund manager or investment company invests in a small business, that investment usually goes to scaling up. And the scaling up along with it means new jobs. Because of the scale-up, they need new skills, they need new manpower to be able to grow this business to the potential that the venture capital investor has seen. And a lot of that money, people would think it goes to marketing, etc., but it really goes to creating new jobs, whether it's sales, whether it's increased in production, whether it's development. So investment into these small businesses really have the opportunity to create meaningful jobs.
Yeah, let's talk about the barriers then that impede investment into venture capital. What are some of those?
So the venture capital industry is still very nascent. It's growing. It still needs to prove its track record. There's more fund managers now that invest, but a lot of institutional investors are still wary of investing into the asset class. Mainly because they don't necessarily understand it or don't necessarily have the mandate to invest in venture capital. There's also some policy and regulatory uncertainty that international investors look at that make them a little bit wary of investing into local venture capital. But the investors that we've seen supporting venture capital, which is family offices, high net worth individuals and corporates, have really made a difference in terms of the growth of the sector.
Yeah, well, we've spoken about the difficulties in trying to set up these companies, whether you talk about the barriers to investment. But once you have set it up and it is now a fully fledged company that is able to employ people, how do we measure the output?
So you can measure output or success or impact in various ways. One of the easiest ways to invest it is job creation, how many direct jobs and indirect jobs were created. Also growth in sales and revenue. And growth in revenue also indicates contribution to the South African tax base. So there's lots of indicators that can show what the impact of these companies might be. There's also some investors that have a social impact and a climate impact mandate. So they will look at how these companies have reduced carbon emissions, etc. So it really depends on the investors and what they measure, but there's various ways in which you can look at the success of a company. But the easiest is job creation and revenue generation.
Yeah. Finally, let's talk about the country's policy that encourages this kind of investment. How would you, what's your assessment of it right now?
Well, actually part of a coalition that is pushing for an SA Startup Act. And in this act, what we've proposed is a series of reforms that will support entrepreneurs and also support more investors to invest in the economy. There's glaring funding gaps in the business's journey. So very seed and early stage investment, there's not a lot of investment that happens there. And then also as a business starts to grow and scale, in South Africa, we just don't have enough venture capital fund managers with big enough funds to support that growth. So in terms of regulatory and reform, the SA Startup Act is a good blueprint of what the potential could be to support more entrepreneurs to be able to scale and also more investors to invest in these companies and all the entrepreneurs that we're seeing coming to the floor with these great innovations.